This is episode 44 of the Marshall Street Podcast.
You're listening to the Marshall Street Podcast, the home of music industry know-how that will give you the skills to take your career to the next level. Here are your hosts, Bennett Ferguson and Stu Watts.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Marshall Street Podcast. Stu Watts, Bennett Ferguson.
Yep.
This episode is called Making the Most of Inspiration, or how to make the most of inspiration, actually, because we're going to discuss how. So first of all, thank you for tuning in. If you like anything that you see in this podcast or hear, make sure you share it with a friend. It is the best way that we can get this out to as many people as we can.
Yep. Also remember to like and subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening to it. And let's get into it. So this week, before we get into it, Stewie, what's been happening this week at Marshall Street?
So this week's been a good week for catching up on all the admin sort of tasks, a lot of preparation work, locking things in.
Yep.
Not a lot that we can actually speak of because it's kind of in the works, in the pipeline.
Here's some confidential business agreements that have been going down.
And, some future media plans to take over the world.
Yep.
Just keep it quiet though.
Yep. But no, it's been, as you said, it's been a super productive week in terms of admin. And I guess even as you voiced in one of our morning meetings, just taking a break from the client work and that kind of rush of doing things for the external expectations, just be able to take that bit of a break and, all right, let's get everything centered in our life, make sure our admin's good, make sure everything we're doing is on point. Because at the end of the day, that just means we can do our job and help facilitate others better.
Yeah, it's like taking that time, that extra little time, to just make sure that you're on the right page.
Yep.
You're on the right track, your head's in the right headspace, the people that you're around are all, connected, and all of those little things will mean that you'll just have a better day.
Yep, but the one exciting bit that we can let out is Josh Trebuzio's track is coming along smashingly. We'll be filming some video assets. For those who don't know, look him up on TikTok. He's got his debut track coming out shortly.
Yep.
But I'm excited for that one.
Yeah. It's going to
be good.
Yeah, you'll see. You'll see. Nice. Well, let's get into it. So how to make the most of inspiration. I guess the reason why we wanted to talk about this one today is because, going off the back of, getting yourself right, when you have all of those pieces in place, a lot of the time that's when the fun things sort of happen. When you're inspiration, or when you're open to receiving inspiration.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like you might be watching something or listening to something, and if you're in a shitty headspace, it'll just kind of go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in a good headspace and everything's feeling good, you're more likely, I think, to be open to receiving inspiration.
Yep, absolutely. And sort of like you may hear a lot of people, like a lot of the, mind and personal growth coaches, they'll say that, we see things and how we act and how we view the world is we project onto others what we see in ourselves. So if you're in that negative headspace, you might have a great opportunity or a great instrumental, a great beat come to you, but you're going to be projecting what the negative things that are going in yourself, and that may stop that opportunity from coming to fruition, or it may stop you just, from having fun, really.
Yeah, look, and definitely there's like all different styles of music and whatever, and types of art and all that sort of stuff. And some stuff comes from dark places, but you still need to be open to it.
You need to be open to the inspiration coming to you. Yep.
Yeah, so I guess to start off with, what are kind of some of the ways that you can harness that inspiration and go with it, do you think?
Well, for me, one of the biggest roadblocks I found early on when I started off producing, DJing, kind of learning my musical skills, the biggest roadblock I got was the actual interfacing with whatever gear or technology I was using.
Yeah.
So I might have listened to a beat and I was like, man, I can picture in my head exactly how these cuts are going to go down.
Yep.
Or I can picture exactly how this transition should go.
Yep.
If I didn't know how to use the gear, how to use the software, if I didn't know that, that was a roadblock between me getting to what was in my head and having that out there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So
I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that, because it's like anything that requires a skill, and like a skill that takes a long time to learn. When you're right at the start, if you don't have those skills, you're trying and you know what's in your head and you know how to like how to hear it and things, but you just don't know how to reproduce it.
Yep, which turns to frustration. And then one of the things we say around here is like, if you're going through frustration, that usually means you're about to learn something. You usually then get through that frustration and you have that aha moment where you're like, that was it. That was what I needed to be able to know, learn, or go through to make this possible.
Yeah, for sure.
So for me, that roadblock was just the actual things that I was interfacing with. And then getting through that meant that I could have an idea, I could have inspiration come to me, and I could get into that creative flow state. Okay, now I'm creating. I'm no longer trying to find where this particular door keeps this plug-in or how I need to talk to that.
Yeah.
I could just let my creativity flow, and then that just leads you to the next creative door that opens, and you keep going down that creative rabbit hole.
Yeah, I like that because it's like rabbit hole is a term that's used all the time, but there's also, it's kind of like, like you said, opening doors. And when you open another door, there's another 2 doors through that door, and you can kind of go one way or the other, and you can kind of just roll with it and kind of get weird with it and just kind of just go, I'm going to go for that one. Like, and creativity is within everyone, but it's whether they allow themselves to harness it. I'm a big believer that everyone has something inside them that they can be open to and reflect. Definitely some people are less skilled than others, but
they can be creative in their own right.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be music or video or a creative field. Some people are amazing with their hands and they can create great things, Some people can't. So it's definitely, there's different aspects to it, but 100% I think it's when we close off that being open to creative, because then you're definitely not going to get there. You're 100% not going to get to your creative goal if you're not open to it.
Yeah, and you see people a lot of the time second guessing themselves is a big thing that I notice, and like even in the studio with people that are talented and are skilled, they sometimes get to this point where they're on the right track and they, for whatever reason, they just kind of put up their own walls. And they go, oh, this isn't right. It's like, keep going with it, keep going with it. And me as a producer, I have to encourage people to try and get that out of them because that leads to good results. But sometimes without that sort of a person there, it can be really hard for you to get past your own mental blocks. But, whatever it is, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to really push yourself past those points of being like, that's not going to work. It's just all guesswork and it's also like negative.
And because also you just never know. It's like the amount of times in my head I would have thought I knew how the cuts were going to go on a track, record them, you listen back to them and you're like, damn, that just doesn't fit. It's not the feel I thought I had. But by going through that, I now see, let me try this one. And then you go, oh man, that was it. I wouldn't have been able to sonically hear that was what it needed if I didn't put my initial ideas down.
And the other thing is like, it could spark a new idea.
Correct.
Yeah, like it's like, for example, I just thought for whatever reason of a delay plugin, like a new delay plugin that I just downloaded. Let's say I chuck it on and I expect that it's going to sound this way, but it just sounds completely different to what I was expecting. And then that kind of gives me, I could try this on something else. Yeah. Whereas if I put that on and heard the results and went, that's not what I'm looking for, and stopped there, chances are I might not use that plugin again. And that's what I mean about like running with it and being open to things and really taking it in, because it's one thing to see something or hear something or, get that first level, that first step of inspiration. But the one after that where it's like I'm taking it in and I'm like reflecting on it and spinning back out into my own brain what I could do with it, that's like that next level.
And you can't get to that next step without the first step.
Yeah.
Like it sounds super obvious, but again, it's really easy for creatives to think about an idea in our mind and then come up with the decision if it's good or bad, and we'll then either stop or allow ourselves to take that first step. When really taking that first step, getting that first initial idea down, even if it may in your head, you're like, oh, well, this isn't going to be what the end result is, that can lead you to another result which can be better than what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's another point on this creative flow that I want to get on, and that is not to overdo it. Sometimes you can have inspiration and you can be working on a song, or you might be collabing with another artist. Say you've got a producer in and they bring you this new beat and you're super excited. You're amped. You're like, man, I can see where this is going. I can see everything's lining up. This is feeling good. And you get into the creative process and you start writing. If you keep going long enough, you will drain yourself. You will wear yourself out and you'll find yourself mentally exhausted with that idea.
There's a definition for that. It's the point of diminishing returns.
Boom.
And that is, exactly that. It's like you will be on this uphill, like this is like, that's good. Like you're going up and then it kind of starts to plateau and then there will be a point where it gets worse.
Yep.
And that absolutely happens with music and creative stuff where you can beat a dead horse. Like you can go too far and you will start to either resent what you're doing or, like you were saying before, get frustrated or especially if you're collaborating, get annoyed at someone else. Yeah. And that's the worst thing.
Yep. And again, this is just a projection that you're projecting on, the other person in the room because you're internally frustrated that you haven't delivered the creative thought that you had in your mind.
Yeah. So I guess tell us more about what triggered that thought.
Well, really, it was the counterpoint. It was how do we stop that happening? And that's by taking a break. That's by stepping away from an inspiration or an idea when you're actually feeling good about it. Yeah. Which sounds counterintuitive to a lot of creatives because it'll be like, hey, I'm feeling the vibe. Shouldn't I write? Or man, I've got this inspiration. Shouldn't I just go with it? And the answer is yes, absolutely at the start. But if you keep going, you can eventually drain yourself. And it means when you come back to that idea, you're going to be coming back with a negative mind space, a negative mindset about the job that you picked up on. When if you can get into, the habit or at least the awareness of once you're in that good creative mindset and you get to a certain point and you're still amped about it, you're still feeling good, just take a break. Step back, do another task. So then when you come back to it, you're coming back with this positive energy.
Do you know someone that I love the workflow of the way they work is Willie Beeman?
Steamin' Willie Beeman.
Who used to work out of the studios here. He's actually living in America because
back
that's
in
where
LA.
he's from.
Yep.
But
he's also got some huge projects dropping, just quietly. But
everyone shout out to Willie.
Yeah. You'll know when they're out.
Yeah. So he used to work out of the Real Studios, which is in the next room. And his workflow was so different to any other producer that I've seen. His approach was he would be working on 10 different tracks at once, maybe, right? And he would just go in, start of the day, open one of them up, listen to it, and kind of be like, ooh, I can hear this. Like, might be like a hat loop or something. Chuck in a hat loop, close the session, move on to the next one. Ooh, I can feel some synths in there, add in these synths, listen back. Is that, tweak it a little bit, close it, next session.
Yep.
And he would be taking breaks probably I'd say once an hour or so. But it just allowed him to stay fresh and not get caught up on anything. And I would never see him get frustrated with music.
Yeah.
He would just go with it. And I was like, far out, that's such a cool way to work. I've just never seen it before. There's no reason why you can't, go about it in a similar way. There's no reason why you have to work on this one project for a whole day or a week or a month.
Which is how I used to do it.
Yeah.
And then that, I look back and it's like, man, no wonder you got so fed up with your tracks or you got so sick of this. It's because we were literally pushing ourselves way past this point of diminishing return, like so far beyond it that it was like, man, I'm surprised the tracks even came out in the end.
Yeah, well, and this is why so many people get stuck on how something sounds or the specificness of a mix or the vocal sound's not right. It's like, can you hear what the person's singing?
Yep.
Is it clear enough? Like that really, there's creative stuff. But sometimes so many people overthink it and hold themselves back for months and months and months.
And again, it's like, we're super blessed that we get to see heaps of different producers and how they work here. I'd never know how Willie works unless you actually got to be exposed to it. And I think a lot of producers and artists coming up, they're on their own in their own room.
Yeah.
So you don't get to see all these other different workflows and be like, hey man, that's actually a really good idea. Which triggered the thought. You've mentioned it before. I don't know who it is. I hope you can remember him.
All right.
But there is someone whose workflow you were talking about, and they label a track with what it's missing.
Yeah. It's Andrew Huang. Is that his name? Andrew Huang? Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So he just did a YouTube video about his workflow, and one of the points that he made was he actually names the file of what he needs to add into the track. So he's an extremely talented producer, and he produces on his own as well as other people, but most of the stuff he does by himself. But his workflow is such that he knows in his head kind of what needs to be in the track before he even creates it, which definitely a lot of producers have as well. But yeah, one thing he does is he just labels guitar, bass, and then what happens is on the day where he needs to record guitar, he'll just find all the tracks that need guitar because they have the word guitar in the file name, open it up, lay down the guitar, move on to the next one, lay down the guitar for the next one. But that was his way of combating unfinished files.
Okay.
Right. So produceritis means that we're creating a whole bunch of different tracks all the time, new song, like 30-second idea, another 30-second idea.
Yep.
And it just builds and builds and builds to a point where you have like hundreds of unused tracks that could potentially be finished songs.
Yep.
And that is a really good way to go about combating that. You can still be creative.
Yeah, what I like about it is, for me, that would mean if I came into the studio and I was just like, man, I was meant to do X, Y, and Z, but I just really want to play guitar, man. Like, I just feel like it's a guitar day. Then I'm not going to have to sift through all these beats, because I used to name my files of things that were on my desk. So it'd be like empty pint glass, pot plant, and that's a horrible way to organize things looking back.
Well, it's probably slightly better than new 01, new 02A, new ready to be finished.
Yep. But it would mean then if I, say I came in and I was like, man, I just really feel like playing guitar. I could then go through my files and get creative and let that inspiration happen. And all of a sudden I've taken out that friction. You know, that's interfacing with my files, a computer. I've gotten to the point of A, I want to be creative with the guitar, to B, let's let this flow.
And that is a future proofing of it takes time to get yourself into that habit of doing things that way, and it might be slightly different to the way that you normally do things. But once you're in that habit of naming your files that specific way, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And you've saved yourself time of going, oh, what needs guitar again?
Yes.
You know, this is just one example, but you can apply this to any different types of workflows, things that I've talked about before, which is like organizing your samples in a really intuitive way, making sure your one-shots are in a folder, your loops, like that the loops are organized, if it's a drum beat, into the tempo, or if it's a guitar or keys or something, into the key that it's played in, and then into the tempo. The amount of levels that you can eliminate to be creative is beneficial. And yes, it takes a whole lot of time, but once it's done, it's done. And then from then on, if you get new samples, for example, all you have to do from then on is add it into the folders that you've already created. So that time that it takes is a once-off thing, hopefully, if you back your things up properly. And it's saving so much time to allow you to let creativity guide your day.
When that inspiration comes, how do you have the least amount of friction for you to get that idea down? And even another idea just popped in my head as you were talking about that was, for me, unpacking gear after a show. So, you know, I'd get back from a show and my 2 turntables, mixer, records, everything like that, they'd obviously be in cases. And I wouldn't unpack them the day you got back from a show, which meant the next morning, if I woke up and I wanted to cut or I wanted to put down some scratches, I had a friction point there to unpack hard cases, to re-plug in everything, and there's just, it was like...
Drummers will know that pain as well.
Correct, yes. And all of a sudden it was like, I don't really feel like doing it. I haven't allowed myself to make the most of inspiration.
My other step that you can add to that was leaving it in the car after rehearsal. Like I'd come home wrecked after rehearsing for 3 hours playing drums. And I'd be like, I'm not taking my drums out of the car. So the next day I was like, oh, I've got to take the drums out of the car. And then I have to set them up. Like so many extra steps that just stop you from doing it. And people make excuses about, oh, my drums weren't set up or blah, blah, blah. That's not the core issue here. Your laziness is.
That's a symptom. It's a byproduct.
It is,
but there is I think a time when you need to just continue to push through this point of diminishing will return, we'll say. And to me, that's when you're doing a non-creative task, whether that's admin, it could be paperwork. As we've spoken about in our previous podcast, if you're going into music for yourself, at the end of the day, you're going to business for yourself. So there is admin sides of it. There's responding to emails, there's doing PR, there's writing your own press releases. There's all those other tasks that go along with being creative. And to me, those tasks should be treated differently. To me, they're objective-based tasks when it's not, hey man, I was really in the mood to reply to my emails. It was like, no, this needs to be done, so you do it. And that's where the self-discipline comes into it.
Correct. And there's a number of ways of going about that. I hope everyone knows by now that the studies that have been done about multitasking tell you that multitasking is not really a good idea. You cannot be as productive having to think about 4 different things. I saw that. He said before the show that he was going to make some faces, and I caught it.
Multitasking.
So multitasking. You having to think of 4 different things at once means that your brain is cluttered, and you cannot be as productive as otherwise taking them one task at a time. For admin tasks, this is a prime example of scheduling your time effectively and making sure that you are doing things efficiently so that it doesn't take longer than it needs to. Sometimes if you've got heaps of admin stuff to do, it can take up to 2 days. But with effective scheduling and preparation, that can be taken down to 1 day, half a day.
Yep, and not even that, just little bits at a time. If your emails and your admin is super organized, so it's just a matter of, all right, I know I've got to do X, Y, and Z. It's just when do I do it? Then all of a sudden, those mornings when you wake up, you're like, man, I don't feel like playing guitar or I don't feel like recording, but I know I've got 40 minutes of emails. You can just go in and do the emails rather than, all right, well, when did this person reply to me? Where's this email? Which email account did I reply to it to? Do I need to print something out? All of those things that go along with being disorganized are just an added friction layer between you and getting the task done.
Yeah, and if you're doing it the same way every time, that means that you are going to be quicker at it. And my example is invoicing for that. Like the way that I invoice and the way that I've trained myself to action things when they need to be actioned means that I know as soon as someone asks for a quote or if they have a track that they want mixed or something, I know that I don't start the track until I invoice them. So why not get it done as soon as possible? And all my organization of my bookkeeping and all that boring shit is organized in a way that I do it the exact same way every time. I open the same file, I edit it, all I have to do is change a few little areas on the invoice and I'm done. And that could, if you were unorganized, build up. You could build up, 3 or 4 different invoices. You might invoice them late. You might not get paid on time. All of these extra shitty things that can happen because of your lack of organization.
And then that can also build on your mental health. All of a sudden it's very hard to be creative if in the back of your mind, this needs to be done and this isn't done. And this is something that you've brought in and helped me with our calendar organizing. It's like as soon as something gets done, it's very easy for me not to put it into our calendar and just have it in my head to do it. But it's like, no, as soon as something needs done and needs actioned, pull out your phone and put it in the calendar. Because in my head, it's like, oh, I could do it now. I could do it in 15 minutes. But again,
there's no difference.
That just builds.
There is difference though. It's the human brain can only remember so much shit.
But and again, getting into that habit of, okay, as soon as someone needs my time or I'm scheduled for a phone call or a Zoom or a booking, put it in the calendar straight away, and then my mind can forget about it.
Correct.
It can keep carrying on with the task at hand or what I was doing, and there isn't that floating item of, hey man, don't forget, this is coming up. And
the other thing is, when it comes to the point that you're actually doing the thing that you've put into your calendar, you can give that the most attention as it needs. If it's a client, especially, like if you've got organized a booking with a client or something like that, you don't have to be thinking about all of the other stuff, and you can give that person your full attention, which actually it leads to better outcomes. For both you and the client. Repeat customers, people know that you're paying attention to them. I know we've gone kind of the opposite side of creativity, but it all factors in because when your career is a creative field, regardless of whether there's heaps of admin involved, if some of it is creative, all of this organization means that when you get these waves of inspiration, you can really give yourself to it and just let it
100%.
happen.
Yep. It's kind of like, as you've heard, and I'm sure in this podcast I've said before, I believe contradiction is the meaning of life. It's
In fact, you said it in the last episode.
Beautiful. But people think by having all this structure and organization around, like, oh man, you're not free to do anything. If inspiration comes, you can't do it because you've got this structure. When it's the complete opposite. If all your stuff is organized and you have great structures, you can be like, hey man, yeah, I've got X, Y, and Z, but I'm just feeling like playing guitar. You can then make a very good judgment call of, all right, guess what? I'm going to go be creative for 30 minutes because I know everything that needs to be done because my organization is on point.
Yep.
So I can now allow myself to go with that inspiration.
Yep.
And I'm not going to forget about this because it's not written down and this isn't going to get done. It's like, no, I can see it's all organized. I'll just come back to it when my admin tasks are there.
Yeah, and my weakness with that is cleaning my workspace, cleaning my studio, and I've talked about it with you before and you've given me some pointers. But, there are things that are limiting me from being fully creative, whether it's like having my guitar pedals in a certain position, not having my leads, in like close. It means I have to step up to go and reach it off there's a whole bunch of stuff that in my head I know needs doing and I haven't done it. So, but in all of the other areas that I am more actively doing currently, such as my computer organization, organizing samples, all of my mix templates, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
That is like
on point.
Yeah.
And you can tell, like, there's times when artists come through here and just how quick you can get into a session, allow them to work. Like young artists or artists who may not have worked with an engineer at a high level, first thing is it blows them away. They're like, man, I'm not waiting for him to scroll back and he knows it. It's like, dude, he's straight into it.
Yep.
But then not only that, if you're in the position where you're engineering for a bigger artist or you get a big career opportunity, you've got the skills and the tools to make the most out of that. Like we had Little Mosey come through here, and we found out on a dime's notice. We've had other big artists, international artists, book the studio out when they're in Australia and then not come through. So you end up being on call here, all night. So we basically get the call. He could come at any time. We're not sure. Comes in, and then if you were going to make a international artist wait while you set up a session, well, hey man, can I just...
It's a waste of their time.
They're like, dude, what am I doing in here? But so then because you've got all these things in place, you can get the call on a drop of a hat that X is coming into the studio. Cool, we know the skills are in place, and guess what? I'm going to allow you to be the best creative version of yourself, and I'm now just allowing you to do you.
And then word spreads.
Correct. That's right. And then you get the next call and then they go, hey man, I was super happy with that studio. If we're back in town again, we'll make sure we come through. Nice. Well, I think that's that was a pretty good podcast there on Inspiration, Stu. Do you want to give us a few key takeaways?
Yep. Allowing yourself to be creative is one thing. Don't stop yourself. You know, if you have this internal voice that tells you, that's not going to work, please ignore it and go with it and see what happens. Because the worst that can happen is, it doesn't work. But the best that can happen is you come up with another 5, 10, 100
It
new
leads to
ideas.
something else that did work.
Yep. So that's the first thing. Organization of your, workspace, your digital workspace, all of these areas in your life need to be organized.
Yep.
To allow you to be fluent when inspiration hits and you want to be creative.
Yep. Don't have any friction points in between you and being creative.
Yep. And the one that you pointed out is having the awareness to know when you are pushing the point of diminishing returns.
Yep.
Because there is a point where you work on something too much and it ends up being a piece of shit just because you've gone too hard.
Yep.
Whereas if you
take a break. We used to call them sports breaks.
Yeah.
Have a DYE sports breaks.
Yep.
Just get out, but it just freshens the mind. It means you can come back with a good mindset to the project rather than draining yourself.
Yeah.
And then the last one is separating creative tasks from the mundane admin tasks, because there is tasks in your life and in your career that are purely objective based. You need to get them done. And knowing which tasks they are, being like, okay, man, am I past the point of diminishing return writing this email? Look, we could argue what that is, but the point is you need to get it done.
Yeah.
It's not like a creative song or a video you're editing.
Yep.
So being able to separate those tasks and approach them differently, I feel is super important.
Yeah, it just means that you'll be able to get things done quicker. You'll impress your clients.
Yep.
There's so many benefits to
And
be
if you're
able to
invoicing, you get paid quicker.
Totally. Yep.
Nice.
Nice. Well, again, thank you always for checking us out wherever that is, on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever it is.
As always, if you've liked what you've heard, make sure to comment and subscribe to this channel. And if
share it with your mates.
Share it with your friends. And we will see you next time.
Peace.
See ya.